For decades, it sat there, forgotten by time and swallowed by the overgrowth of moss and ivy. Locals called it the Well of Death, though no one seemed to agree on where the name came from. Some said it was because of the suicides, young women mostly, who had thrown themselves in to escape abusive husbands or unplanned pregnancies. Others whispered of darker origins, stories buried under centuries of folklore. Regardless of the truth, one thing was certain: no one went near that well. Not anymore. But that didn't stop Jacob and his friends from thinking it would make the perfect centerpiece for their YouTube ghost hunting video. Jacob had always been obsessed with urban legends. His channel, Dead Ends, was a growing hub for paranormal enthusiasts. But it needed something big, something to finally push it into viral territory. The Well of Death seemed like the perfect candidate. It was obscure, creepy, and, as far as he could tell, no one else had ever dared to try filming there. It was a gold mine waiting to be tapped. "Dude, this is gonna blow up," Jacob said as he packed his camera gear into the trunk of his car. His best friend Max leaned against the car, chewing on a toothpick with an air of casual disinterest. "Or we'll blow up," Max muttered. "You've heard the stories. People don't just fall in there. They get pulled." Jacob rolled his eyes. "Come on, man, you're buying into that? It's just an old well, probably full of rats and rainwater." Max shrugged. "You keep saying that until you hear something crawling out of it." They arrived at the well just before sunset. It was buried deep within a patch of forest on the outskirts of town, far enough that the only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a bird. The well itself was everything Jacob had hoped for: ancient, crumbling, and dripping with atmosphere. The stones were slick with moss, and the wooden beams that once held the bucket and rope were rotted away, leaving only jagged remnants behind. "Creepy as hell," said Sarah, the third member of their group. She was the skeptic of the bunch, but had a knack for editing, which made her invaluable. "You sure this thing's stable? I don't want to fall in and end up as some spooky statistic." "It's fine," Jacob said, though he wasn't entirely sure. "Just don't lean over too far." They set up their equipment quickly: cameras, microphones, an EMF reader, and a few flashlights. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest seemed to tighten around them, the shadows growing thicker and more oppressive. "All right," Jacob said, turning on the camera. "We're here at the legendary Well of Death, a site shrouded in mystery and tragedy. Tonight, we're going to find out if there's any truth to the stories." He gestured dramatically to the well. Behind him, Max snorted. "You sound like one of those cheesy ghost show hosts." "Shut up," Jacob said, laughing. "Let's get started." For the first hour, nothing happened. They tried all the usual tricks, calling out to any spirits that might be listening, asking for signs, leaving offerings around the edge of the well. The EMF reader flickered once or twice, but it was probably just interference from their equipment. Then, as Sarah was packing up one of the microphones, something changed. The air grew colder, not just chilly, but biting, like the middle of winter. The three of them exchanged uneasy glances. "Did you feel that?" Sarah whispered. Before anyone could answer, a low, guttural sound echoed from the well. It was faint at first, barely audible over the rustling of the trees, but it grew louder, more defined. A wet, slithering noise, like something dragging itself upward. "What the hell is that?" Max said, stepping back. Jacob grabbed his flashlight and shone it into the well. At first, he saw nothing but darkness, the beam of light swallowed by the void. Then something moved. It was subtle, a ripple in the shadows, a glint of something wet and reflective. "Hello?" Jacob called, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to sound brave. "Is someone down there?" The noise stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice floated up from the depths, soft and broken, as if spoken through shattered vocal cords. "Help me!" Sarah gasped. Max swore under his breath. Jacob's knuckles whitened around the flashlight. "Did you hear that?" he hissed. "Let's get out of here," Sarah said, already backing away. "This isn't funny anymore." But Jacob was frozen, staring into the well. The voice had sounded so real, so human. He couldn't just leave. What if someone was trapped down there? "I'm going to look," he said, stepping closer. "Are you insane?" Max grabbed his arm. "We're leaving, now." But Jacob shook him off. He pulled a rope and harness from his bag. He'd brought it just in case, and began securing it to one of the sturdier-looking trees nearby. "You're not seriously going down there?" Sarah said, her voice rising in panic. "If someone's stuck, I can't just leave them," Jacob said. "I'll be fine. Just hold the rope." Against their better judgment, Max and Sarah reluctantly helped lower Jacob into the well. The walls were slick and cold, and the smell of damp earth filled his nostrils. As he descended, the circle of light above grew smaller, and the darkness below pressed in tighter. "Can you see anything?" Max called down. "No," Jacob replied. His voice echoed strangely, distorting as if the well were far deeper than it had seemed from above. "Wait, there's something—" The rope jerked violently, cutting off his words. Above, Max and Sarah screamed as they struggled to hold on. "Jacob!" Sarah shouted. "What's happening?" Jacob didn't answer. The rope was yanked again, harder this time, pulling it through their hands. Then with a final, sickening snap, the rope went slack. "Jacob!" Max yelled into the well, but there was no response, only silence. The authorities never found Jacob. They searched the well for weeks using cameras and sensors, but there was no sign of him. The well, they said, wasn't even that deep, certainly not deep enough for someone to vanish completely. Max and Sarah never spoke of what they'd seen that night, not to the police, not to their families, not even to each other. How could they explain the shadowy hands that had reached out of the darkness, the inhuman face that had stared up at them with empty, hungry eyes? The well of death was sealed shortly after Jacob's disappearance. A slab of concrete poured over its mouth, but the locals still avoid the area. They say that on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear him screaming for help.